Welcome back to Beyond the Comfort Zone, Talking Shit with KING-KAMBUF. Today, we are immersing ourselves in a source document that is, well, it's less a conventional report and much more of an operational blueprint. It's this document that fuses, high-level geopolitical strategy with the absolute nuts and bolts of architectural mandates.
Right.
We are analyzing the KAMBUF National Building Design Command Brief. Specifically, this is the third iteration, dated Monday, November 24th, 2025. They call it Automation Turn #3.
And I think it's absolutely critical to understand that this is a command brief. That word command is not there by accident.
Not at all.
It's not an aspirational white paper, a list of nice ideas. It sets mandatory design parameters. It sets systemic goals for the architecture studios that are involved.
So the direct order, basically.
It is. It's the tactical map for implementing KING-KAMBUF's entire strategy for securing the future territory, the economy of its decentralized city-states and its global hubs.
Exactly. So our mission today is to take this high-voltage strategic document and pull out the most important knowledge nuggets for you, the learner. The core theme of this deep dive is, frankly, existential.
It really is.
It's titled Coastal Resilience and Blue Economy Infrastructure for KAMBUF City-States and Diaspora Hubs.
That phrase alone is, it's a masterclass in synthesis, really.
How so?
They are explicitly merging two enormous, often completely separate fields. You have climate adaptation, so resilience.
Right, the defensive part.
And then you have maritime economic development, which is the blue economy. They're fusing them into a single, unified national strategic asset.
So you can't have one without the other.
They're stating it right up front. You cannot have a viable economy on the coast without resilience, and you cannot fund true long-term resilience without a robust economy to pay for it.
Okay, let's unpack this enormous scope. When we talk about infrastructure strategy here, we're not talking about, small, localized fixes, a little seawall here, a new building there.
No, this is system level.
We are looking at mandated designs for resilient coastal defenses, complex port city integration systems, elevated sea level rise, adaptive housing clusters, and even leveraging ecological assets like mangrove buffer systems across this huge transborder network. It spans Africa, the Caribbean, and even the U.S.
And we have to remember the context that was established by the previous turns. We've already seen deep dives on Afro-digital infrastructure and data sovereignty.
Right, BART #1.
And then the second one was agro-industrial food systems. So think about it. Those first two briefs secured the network's data and its food supply.
The virtual and the biological.
Exactly. Now, in turn #3, the focus shifts to securing the physical perimeter itself, the coastline, which is, both the most vulnerable point to climate change and the most vital for global trade.
That brings us to the master challenge focus for this brief, which I found fascinating.
Yeah.
The mandate for this third turn focuses not just on the physical building, but on urban systems and policy. And my first question was, why are we spending so much time talking about zoning regulations and governance frameworks when we should be talking about concrete and steel?
Because the brief recognizes a fundamental truth. Steel rusts, concrete cracks. But poor policy can collapse an entire system overnight.
Okay, explain that.
Think about it. If you pour $1 billion into a resilient port, a beautiful piece of engineering, but the governance structure is weak, or the policy allows for, say, non-resilient development to pop up right next to it, that port will eventually be isolated, it'll become uninsured, and then economically stranded. The policy is the system.
So we're talking about designing policy for things like dictating land use, years, even decades into the future. What specific policy elements are being mandated under this urban systems and policy banner?
It's a complete systems overhaul. First, you have zoning for sea level rise. And this isn't just about, drawing new flood lines on a map. It means enacting laws that actually prohibit certain types of construction below a specific climate adaptive datum, and then actively incentivizing construction that is elevated or modular.
So carrots and sticks.
Exactly. Second, governance of coastal zones. Who owns the newly protected land? How is the revenue from this new blue economy infrastructure shared? And third, and this is maybe the biggest policy lift,
The money.
the money. Financing resilience efforts, creating mechanisms like special climate adaptation funds, or we'll see this a lot, the diaspora investment vehicle that they keep mentioning. These are designed to bypass that reliance on conventional, high-interest foreign debt.
That makes the architecture a physical manifestation of a political and financial decision.
That's it.
So understanding this brief means you have to recognize that the design work, the cool drawings, They're a tool for systemic governance and long-term adaptation. It's about creating a regulatory environment that forces longevity and resilience instead of just, hoping for it.
Absolutely. If you design a beautiful elevated housing unit, but the local governance framework doesn't include policy on how to maintain community access or how to fund its future climate-proofing upgrades,
The design is incomplete.
the design is a failure waiting to happen. The policy is the protective layer that secures the infrastructure. It's what ensures it serves the nation's systemic goals for decades to come.
Okay, let's focus now on those objectives. The brief requires these robust, multi-layered systems, resilient coastal defenses, port city integration, and this is critical, blending hard and soft infrastructure. They demand, quote, mangrove-based buffer systems integrated right alongside these climate-adaptive public realms.
This integration piece is crucial. It's a move away from the 20th century model of just, purely defensive concrete seawall.
Which just destroy ecosystems.
They obliterate them. Mangrove restoration zones, on the other hand, provide what we call ecosystem services. They clean water, they support fisheries, and they are immensely effective at dissipating wave energy during storms. So designing this means architects have to work directly with coastal ecologists and policymakers.
To do what exactly?
To designate protected areas for restoration. You can't just build your seawall and hope the mangroves come back. You have to design the space for them to thrive as part of the system.
Here's where we get to the core philosophical link that the brief keeps hammering home. The document explicitly links the successful implementation of this blue economy and the coastal resilience systems to, get this, the sovereignty and longevity of KING-KAMBUF coastal communities. That's an extraordinary claim to put into an architectural brief. How, mechanistically, does a new port or a mangrove forest equate to national sovereignty?
It's a very modern geopolitical perspective. Right. Sovereignty isn't just defined by, borders on a map anymore.
Right.
It's defined by functional control and economic viability. If a nation's primary ports flood every decade and they require massive recurrent foreign aid just to recover,
they lose control.
That nation loses its economic autonomy. It loses functional control over its own vital trade arteries. So, by designing ports, logistics hubs, and residential areas that can withstand projected sea level rise, and we're talking about protection up to the year 2100 in some of these schemes.
We'll get to that. It's wild.
By doing that, they are physically guaranteeing the nation's ability to conduct trade, to house its population, and to remain economically self-sufficient, regardless of accelerating climate shocks.
So in essence, they are building physical non-negotiable territory.
Yes.
If the land is resilient, it's guaranteed territory. If it floods, it becomes vulnerable to external control or debt or just eventual abandonment.
Precisely. And this mandate forces a really deep exploration into what the blue economy actually means in the specific context. It's not just fisheries. The brief defines it as the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth. So that covers everything from logistics, marine aquaculture, specialized tourism, marine biotech labs, sustainable energy, all of it powered by and protected by this new resilient infrastructure.
So the blue economy is the revenue stream.
Yes.
That pays for the sovereignty guarantee.
That's the loop. The system is designed to fund itself.
Let's circle back to the policy dimension for a second. Focus #2. We mentioned zoning. But what about the policy that ensures, quote, inclusive community access? This seems like a crucial check against the fear that these projects just create, climate fortresses for the wealthy and end up displacing local populations.
Right, and that's where the policy mandate demands systems design, not just building design. For instance, the policy has to ensure that land use regulation prevents private developers from just consuming all the protected coastal buffer zones for luxury condos. It requires integrating community facilities like blue economy training centers and community resilience plazas directly into the design itself, guaranteeing public benefit.
So it's baked in from the start.
It has to be. Furthermore, the brief often requires policy for something called value capture.
Okay, what's that?
If a new resilient port suddenly triples the value of all the land nearby, the policy has to ensure that some of that increased value is recaptured.
Wow.
Maybe through special assessment districts or taxes. That recaptured money is then used to perpetually fund the maintenance of the seawall or the mangrove trusts. It ensures the resilience benefits are shared and, crucially, sustainable for the long term.
So policy design here is acting as both the social contract and the financial engine.
That's a great way to put it.
Without policies that, define coastal zoning amendments or institute specific trade zone tax incentives, the physical building is just. It's functionally a stranded asset. It's vulnerable to systemic failure, to uncontrolled rapid urbanization, and ultimately to debt failure.
That's the core realization of this entire brief. The physical architecture is the means to implement the ends defined by the policy. If the policy demands resilience, the architecture provides the physical structure. If the policy demands capital mobilization, the architecture has to provide the trade platform to generate that revenue.
The global scope of this is just breathtaking. We're not talking about one architectural firm designing one port. We're looking at 10 simultaneous, highly specific challenges that map out a transborder strategic network. Let's dive into the specifics, starting with the West African and Mediterranean hubs.
Okay.
Scheme 1, Senegal, Dakar Coast, is our first example of what you call protection plus integration. The challenge here is immense. We need a protective seawall, mangrove restoration zones, a logistics and port edge, a blue logistics hub, and housing clusters, all of it layered one on top of the other in a densely populated, rapidly eroding area.
And this forces an engineering paradox, right? How do you build a hard defensive structure that actually allows for the soft infrastructure, the mangroves, to thrive?
Yeah, they seem like opposites.
They do. The mandate requires a modular seawall unit resisting wave force. Now, that language suggests they're looking for prefabricated, rapidly deployable units that can be inserted into the ecosystem with minimal disruption.
So not a giant concrete pour.
Exactly. Then the housing has to be elevated slab housing, and the metrics are non-negotiable. They need quantifiable hectares of mangrove restored. That's the ecological goal. And the number of housing units above the projected 2050 sea line. That's the climate goal.
That distinction is fascinating. The modular seawall versus the mangrove system. The seawall handles the acute shock of a storm wave, while the mangroves provide the chronic long-term erosion protection and all those other ecological services. It's a redundancy strategy designed right into the infrastructure itself.
It is. And the implementation angle they specify is a perfect example of policy-enabling design. It requires a public-private port authority and a community mangrove trust. Yes. That trust is a policy mechanism. It's a legal structure that ensures the ecological assets, the very things securing the coast, are managed and protected locally. It secures their longevity way beyond the initial construction phase.
Okay, shifting to Scheme 3, Ghana, Aquaculture Coast. The brief here emphasizes the integration challenge in what's a critical, highly urbanized corridor. The required deliverables are very clear. Diaspora trade platforms, resilient coastal housing, and a system for blue economy value capture.
Aquaculture is all about maximizing dense coastal economic opportunity. And the brief doesn't just ask for housing, it asks for the detailed design of an elevated housing podium plus cold chain device.
A cold chain device. That's a very specific technical detail.
It's a crucial one. Why a cold chain? Because the local blue economy relies heavily on fisheries. By requiring a resilient, elevated cold chain device integrated into the residential podium, they are literally building the economic platform right into the housing.
So it stabilizes the supply chain.
For perishable goods, yes. Against floods, against heat waves. It secures the livelihoods of the residents who are likely fishers or traders related to that industry.
That clarifies the tension. The design isn't just about putting people in a safe house. It's about providing them with an economic engine that can withstand a climate shock.
Precisely. And the implementation confirms this. It demands a diaspora investment fund working alongside the Port Authority and policy for land use regulation. That diaspora fund is the specified financial tool to secure this local economic infrastructure.
So the fund is the key to bypassing those foreign loans.
Exactly. The diaspora fund provides the necessary patient capital, which is different from a bank loan. It allows them to build those resilient cold chains and housing podiums. So the architectural design is actually a prerequisite for unlocking that specific form of strategic investment.
Okay, let's move to the Mediterranean. Scheme 7, Egypt, Alexandria. This is a site just steeped in history. The brief requires integrating port services, blue trade offices, and resilient systems while explicitly embedding cultural and diaspora identity. They even call for a cultural plaza structural node.
This project really highlights the need for cultural anchoring. Alexandria isn't just a logistics hub, it's a civilization.
Right.
So the design has to ensure that these resilience efforts don't just sterilize the urban environment. That cultural plaza structural node acts as a physical anchor for diaspora identity for public life, and it's protected by the same resilient structure that supports the trade offices.
But the requirement that really stood out to me here was the future-proofing. Housing units must be safe to the projected 2100 sea line.
Yeah.
Wait, 2100, that's what, 75 years of guaranteed structural viability from the date of the brief? How does an architect even begin to calculate the cost and the material requirements for an investment with that kind of horizon, especially given how uncertain climate models are over that long a term?
It demands an extremely conservative engineering approach. You're likely requiring super elevated foundations, advanced composite materials that don't corrode, and a structural datum set significantly higher than even the most aggressive current flood projections.
And what does that signal?
It signals to investors, to residents, to everyone that this is a truly generational asset. It transforms the project from being a simple repair job to a national longevity strategy. This decision, built right into the brief, is policy being implemented through architecture.
So if we summarize this first set of hubs, West Africa and the Mediterranean, the theme is definitely protective integration. They're fighting erosion. They're integrating all these diverse assets from ports to cultural plazas and ensuring that the hard infrastructure supports the soft, natural solutions like mangroves.
And crucially, they are defining the policy mechanisms, the port authorities, the diaspora funds, the community trusts, as the essential enabler for the physical structure to even exist. The success of that modular seawall in Senegal is completely inseparable from the success of the community mangrove trust that manages the ecosystem behind it.
Now we shift south to a place where the challenge is maybe less about that intense urban density and more about utilizing vast coastlines for specialized high-tech value creation. Let's start with Scheme 2, Mozambique, Maputo Bay. It focuses on creating a multifunctional resilience zone.
Maputo Bay is a perfect example of turning a liability of vulnerable coastline into a production engine. The resilience zone includes a coastal resilience park for defense, yes, but immediately adjacent to it are large-scale aquaculture facilities, logistics hubs, and blue economy training institutes.
So resilience meets economic metrics head-on.
Exactly. They are demanding quantifiable results, not just the area is safer, but aquaculture yield in tons per year and the number of local training graduates. This proves that the money spent on resilience is simultaneously driving economic growth and skilling up the local population.
That link is incredibly effective politically. Instead of saying, we spent X million dollars to protect against potential damage, they're saying, we spent X million dollars and now we produce Y tons of high-value seafood while simultaneously reducing our Z-storm damage risk percentage.
And that is the definition of a strategic asset. The Resilience Park protects the aquaculture, and the aquaculture provides the revenue and the jobs necessary to maintain the park. The system is designed to be financially self-sustaining and climatically self-protecting.
Okay, let's move to a really specialized island context. Scheme 5, Seychelles. This island state is designated in the brief as a nation-state of blue innovation. What does high-tech island resilience even look like?
It looks compact, high value, and extremely hardened. The focus here is on very specialized infrastructure. Marine biotech labs and aquaculture processing facilities, all of them built on tsunami-resilient structural podiums.
Tsunami risk is a different ballgame than just sea level rise.
Completely. It demands massive structural integrity and elevation to withstand high-velocity horizontal forces. So you're talking about specialized construction materials, deep pilings. It's a whole different level of engineering.
And the metrics reflect this high-tech focus. Success is measured by the number of marine lab patents and the overall climate resilience rating of the structures.
Right. And the policy enabler is equally specialized. They call for a private-public marine tech consortium. This is a mechanism to attract global R&D capital, leveraging the island's unique marine environment, which is now protected by this state-of-the-art resilient design.
So the architecture is essentially a shield for the real asset.
What's fascinating is that the brief treats the marine ecosystem itself as the primary resource. The architecture is, as you said, basically a highly protected, functional research vessel that's been anchored to the island, ensuring that the valuable intellectual property being generated remains sovereign.
Finally, in the section, we have Scheme 6, South Africa, Durban. This is a massive industrial scale challenge. You're integrating existing heavy freight operations with new blue economy goals and, crucially, Community access. Durban is already a huge, complex port city.
The scale is everything here. The brief demands a coastal freight corridor map at a scale of 1.2,000. Now, to put that in perspective for you,
Okay.
that scale requires mapping out the entire city region, not just the harbor. It's the rail lines, the road network, the immediate surrounding communities, and how freight moves across provincial or even national lines. They are not just redesigning a quay, they are redesigning the regional governance of logistics flow.
So the resilience solution isn't just a seawall for the port itself. It has to look at how a future storm surge might disrupt the existing railhead miles inland, and how the infrastructure has to adapt to keep that whole system flowing.
Precisely. They require new blue processing modules to be integrated seamlessly into the heavy industry area, along with a public resilience plaza. And the key metric here is freight kilometer reduction.
Which shows what?
It shows they are trying to improve industrial efficiency, shorter transport distances, while layering in climate resilience. This ensures the new design is not just defensive, but it's actually highly performant from an economic standpoint. This is sophisticated urban planning married to heavy industrial engineering.
So analyzing this section, Southern Africa and the islands,
Yeah.
the mandate is absolutely value creation plus extreme resilience. The coastlines are being utilized for cutting-edge, highly technical blue value activities requiring specialized, high-integrity structures capable of handling tsunami, heavy freight, and sustained economic output all at the same time.
And the policy has to be scaled to the city region. That 1.20,000 map mandate confirms that the policy must address regional logistics, governance, and transborder systems, not just simple municipal zoning.
These next projects are maybe the most explicit demonstration of the nation-building concept's global reach. They connect the African continent directly to the diaspora via these resilient trade platforms. Let's start with a place of extreme vulnerability. Scheme 4 focuses on Haiti, Port-au-Prince. The task is to build a flood-resilient coastal platform to support training and export, anchored to diaspora linkages.
Haiti presents the challenge of extreme chronic instability coupled with very high climate risk. So the mandated solution has to be robust. It's an elevated steel and concrete platform over the coastal zone.
So you're literally building new land.
You're essentially creating a stable, artificial ground level for commerce and training, where the natural ground is completely unreliable due to floods, erosion, and seismic risk. It's infrastructure as a guarantee of stability.
And that stable platform is then leveraged by the policy mechanism they specify, a diaspora investment vehicle and an adjacent training institute. This seems to show a community-led, capital-efficient approach.
It is. It's designed to inject resilience and economic stability directly into a highly vulnerable area, and it's bypassing the often problematic large-scale government infrastructure projects that have failed in the past.
And the structure itself.
The structural choice, elevated steel and concrete, also speaks to rapid constructability and long-term durability in a high-risk setting. It's designed to be reliable even when the surrounding governance environment might be fragile.
Moving south, we go to Scheme 8, Brazil, Salvador Bahia. This scheme is unique because it emphasizes merging cultural identity with coastal resilience. It requires a blue culture campus, a diaspora trade lounge, and logistics hubs for specialized exports like fish and seaweed.
This project recognizes that culture is a sovereign asset. By mandating a blue culture campus, they are securing traditional knowledge, art, and identity within the same resilient shell that protects the commercial logistics.
And the metric that we have to pay attention to is cultural jobs created.
That's the one. It confirms that success isn't just measured by tons of seaweed exported, but by the social and historical capital that's being preserved and monetized. So the policy must, therefore, include mechanisms to recognize and value cultural heritage in a way that is insurable and economically viable.
This completely transforms the idea of resilience. It's not just about protecting structures. It's about protecting the social and economic fabric of the coastal community against climate-driven displacement or economic collapse.
Precisely. If climate change forces cultural institutions to relocate, or if traditional livelihoods just vanish, the policy mission has failed. Here, the resilient platform acts as the foundation for cultural continuity and economic expansion.
Next, we have Scheme 9, Barbados. This is a node focused purely on Atlantic diaspora network logistics. It requires an elevated processing hub, resilient housing, and specialized modules for seaweed and aquaculture processing.
Barbados is being positioned as a key transshipment and processing hub for the Atlantic. The design mandate to establish a new sea-rise structural datum for its elevated logistics shed is fundamental to this.
Why is that so important?
It ensures that the global supply chain, which often bypasses smaller island states, now has a reliable, climate-proof node to facilitate specialized trade in high-value maritime products. It puts them on the map.
Finally, we turn to Scheme 10, the U.S. Miami Diaspora Coastal Resilience and Blue Trade Campus. Applying this framework in a high-risk, high-value U.S. environment must demand a unique adaptation.
It does. The core challenge in Miami is blending the pressures of high-value real estate with extreme climate risk. So the brief requires designing an elevated coastal platform that specifically hosts a diaspora SME hub for African-linked business. This isn't just generic commercial space.
No.
It's a formalized physical anchor for a very specific global economic network.
And the policy implications must be significant, even in the U.S.
They are. Implementation requires navigating local bureaucracy. The brief mandates it. Zoning for elevated building and flood insurance incentives. You can design the most resilient building in the world, but if local policy doesn't adjust the zoning and the insurance rules to recognize that resilience,
The building is dead in the water.
it remains economically non-viable or completely uninsurable.
So what's the lesson here?
That's the ultimate metadata lesson from all of the diaspora schemes, and they spell it out. Policy-zoned, sea-rise, elevated logistics hubs turn risk into trade asset. These hubs are designed for connectivity plus trade platforming. They create physical stability where the global economic network can anchor and thrive, leveraging resilient design to unlock financial value.
This entire section really shows that the KING-KAMBUF project isn't geographically bound, is it? It's ideologically and strategically bound. It's using resilient infrastructure to formalize global economic and cultural ties under a single sovereign framework.
Exactly. And the brief makes it clear that great design is absolutely nothing without effective execution.
Right. Let's look at the operational spine of this document, the action instructions, and the working method. The structured approach demands system diagrams, detailed plans, and the use of quantifiable ESG metrics in all the deliverables.
And those quantified metrics are the non-negotiable measurement of sovereignty. It's not just a feeling. It's square meters protected, it's TEU handled, jobs created, and the percentage of housing above the projected sea line. They are forcing the design process to think like an investor and a government at the same time.
So the design has to be measurable.
It has to be measurable by its impact on the economy, the environment, and social equity, or it's a failure.
Now we get to the core of the strategy, the precedent studies section. These are the explicit lessons learned, the success stories they want to replicate, and, maybe more importantly, the financial pitfalls they are determined to avoid.
This section validates the entire approach. The success case from the OECD directly validates their focus on coastal and trade corridors as being central to doubling Africa's GDP. It emphasizes strategic regional integration.
Which is why we see schemes like Maputo Bay and Durban focusing on the regional logistics corridor.
It's a direct response to that economic strategy. It's proof they're building on what works.
But immediately following that success story is the critical warning on financing, the caution case, financing. It highlights that Africa needs, US $150 billion per year to close its infrastructure gaps? But that foreign loans, without strong domestic capital mobilization, consistently fail to build sustainable resilience. This feels like the financial ghost that haunts every single one of these projects.
It does, and it raises a profound question. Why do foreign loans without domestic capital mobilization fail?
Right, why?
Well, historically, large infrastructure loans tied to foreign entities often come with unfavorable terms. They can demand reliance on foreign expertise or materials, and they create these massive debt service burdens that stifle long-term growth. So when a climate shock hits, the foreign debt remains, but the project might be damaged or destroyed.
Leading to chronic instability.
And a loss of sovereign decision-making power. You're beholden to your creditors.
So the entire architecture of this command brief, the diaspora investment vehicles, the local mangrove trusts, the policy for local value capture, it's all fundamentally designed to defeat this one failure mechanism.
That's it, exactly. They are mandated to design self-sustaining financial ecosystems from the ground up.
So let's connect that back. Look at the Scheme 3 Ghana implementation.
Okay.
It explicitly mandates a diaspora investment fund to finance those elevated podiums.
Right. That fund is the architectural solution to the foreign loan failure. It secures domestic capital, and it ensures that the economic returns from that cold chain flow back into the community, not just to a foreign creditor.
The State of Africa's Infrastructure Report 2025 is cited as another success case, reinforcing the need to build inclusive, resilient systems.
And that applies directly to the mandate that policy must ensure inclusive community access and include mechanisms like the Blue Economy Training Institutes. It's about building human capital alongside physical capital.
And then the final caution case hits on the policy focus of the day. It warns that tightening financing, rapid urbanization, and climate risk. All of these things increase the vulnerability of infrastructure if policy and system design are weak.
Which justifies the entire Focus #2 mandate. The greatest risk isn't the rising tide, it's the weak policy that allows the tide to destroy vulnerable, uninsured assets that were built in the wrong location in the first place.
I want to focus one more time on the technical scale required here. We talked about the Durban 1.20,000 corridor map. When we look at that level of detail, we are talking about ensuring resilience and logistics efficiency across vast pre-existing infrastructure. What kind of political or regulatory policy has to accompany a map of that scale to make it actionable?
A map at that scale means you must establish a regional infrastructure authority that transcends municipal boundaries.
It has to.
Resilience can't stop at the city limit if the rail line carrying freight out of the port runs through 3 separate jurisdictions with different rules. The policy has to mandate unified land use regulation and shared financing mechanisms across that entire corridor.
So it forces regional governance collaboration.
Which is often the hardest part of nation building. It means the policy design is literally governing the movement of goods and the physical space of an entire economic region.
That makes the policy the true structural backbone. The steel and concrete are just components placed within that legal and financial framework.
Absolutely. The implementation policies, the land use regulations, the policy-zoned sea rise standards, the tax incentives for blue economy activities, they are all direct surgical strikes against the strategic vulnerabilities that were identified in those cautionary precedents.
Let's review the powerful closing directive from KING-KAMBUF. This really brings home the immense political weight of this brief. It reads, "The shoreline is the front line of sovereignty."
It's a statement of war against environmental determinism.
What do you mean by that?
It declares that the nation will actively fight climate change not just defensively, but as a strategic means of securing its economic future. The coastline is not a passive boundary to be managed. It is the most critical operational zone for the nation.
And the final line. The seafloor, port yard, and coastal boulevard are the new nation zones.
This elevates the maritime domain, the blue economy territory, to equal political and economic importance as traditional land territory. It's an explicit instruction to master the systems, build the backbone, and expand the nation through resilient policies and platforms that project power and stability into the marine environment.
So this mandate is truly holistic.
It is. It demands technical structural mastery combined with deep policy expertise, all of it serving the grand strategic goal of securing future sovereignty.
This analysis of the KAMBUF National Building Design Command Brief has been, frankly, eye-opening. It demonstrates how architecture and policy are completely inseparable tools of national strategy. What is the single core learning we should carry forward from this?
I think the core learning is that for this system, climate adaptation is entirely integrated with economic development and political strategy. They are not adapting to climate change in a passive way. They are leveraging the necessity of adaptation to build a superior, more resilient, and more financially independent economic structure.
So every element.
Every single element, from the mangrove trust in Senegal to the tsunami podium in Seychelles, is designed to turn environmental risk into a national strategic advantage.
And as we've detailed, the implementation angles, the public-private port authorities, the climate adaptation funds, the diaspora investment vehicles, those are the policy scaffolding required for the physical structures to stand the test of time and climate risk.
Which, given the explicit cautionary precedent about the failure mechanism of foreign loans, we have to leave you, the learner, with the ultimate policy question that's embedded in this ambitious brief.
Go on.
How might the various design and policy elements we discussed, from the self-funding Blue Trade campus in Miami, which requires local zoning adaptations, to the Blue Culture campus in Brazil, which monetizes heritage, how might they be specifically designed to accelerate that necessary domestic capital mobilization across the entire transborder system?
Is the architectural mandate to create structures that are inherently fundable from within the network the final masterstroke of this brief?
That is the level of systemic thinking this brief demands.
Thank you for joining us for this in-depth analysis of the KING-KAMBUF National Building Design Command Brief and National Projects by the services of KING-KAMBUF PS Architecture Design Studios, the KAMBUF Design Command Briefs, and Nation of KAMBUF Project Investments of KING-KAMBUF by the services of KING-KAMBUF PS Architecture. We'll see you next time on Beyond the Comfort Zone Talking Shit with KING-KAMBUF.